Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, August 18th meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be meeting in using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of the Finance Committee members in attendance. Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Present.
And Mr. Alford is absent. So, and I am here. So, okay, we can get this show on the road. Just to begin, we have a bunch of minutes. So, Vin, I saw you sent me something back. Do you want to clarify what we want to approve tonight?
We want to approve the following minutes. Hold on. The one dated July 9th, 2019, September 3rd, 2019, September 10th, 2019, and September 17th, 2019.
Okay. So just the ones, so that first batch was approved.
Yes, uploaded on the 25th of July.
I was going to go check, but that's what,
Yep.
And just FYI, Mark, one thing I would be greatly appreciative of is if ahead of each meeting, like the day before, you just sent out something to the whole committee saying these are the minutes that we should be approving tomorrow, just so that everybody has a chance to, because you know what happens, right? We say in these meetings, we have to do this, and everybody forgets, and the day before they're all going to review the minutes. That's why I keep sending you guys the thing saying, just give me, so we should just do that as a matter of course. So just going forward on Mondays before our meetings, just send out copies of whatever minutes are being, or the current drafts are, and say, this is what we should be approving tomorrow. So, okay, so let me go back to that list that you had been. So it's the second email you sent out.
Correct.
Okay. Let me make sure that so these are all old minutes. I'm trying to remember. I have to see the other ones I knew I had read. I want to make sure I read these, which I think I did. Yes. Okay, so, and Sue, you had a chance to peruse all of these?
I did. I had one question on I had two questions on the 9:17 minutes.
Okay.
And then I gave Vin just a couple minor edits in one other one, and the rest were fine.
I have incorporated, and that was the one I sent out.
Perfect. Okay.
But you have reviewed all of them. That was my key point, because I'm looking at them. I'm pretty sure I've reviewed them, but I just want to make sure there was at least one other set of eyes that took an in-depth look at these. So
I'm sure others reviewed as well.
Yes, no, I have no doubt that others reviewed, but I know that you and I tend to do the most thorough reviews.
But yes, so, I did look at all of them.
Okay. So if that's the case, then we will proceed to. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 4th, 2019.
Can we approve all these in batch?
We can.
We already did June 4th. I didn't include that. Yeah, that was one I don't know how, but we did it, and that was uploaded. So it's July 9th.
Okay.
Is the first set.
So then make the motion for all the ones we want to approve in.
Motion to approve the minutes of July 9th, 2019, September 3rd, 2019, September 10th, 2019, and September 17th, 2019.
Second.
Okay. So Sue, you had a comment you wanted to make on the 17th.
Well, I had two questions, but they more relate to now versus the minutes themselves. So my first question was that we had talked in September about the facilities manager, and I just couldn't remember. It talked about the position requiring a $95,000 a year salary, and I couldn't remember what we had actually approved. So I had just put a question in there, and so I was wondering if it was in the range of what we had talked about on that one. And then down in the area where we talk about the school capital request, they had talked about for Catamount Field
Committee.
requiring design services as well as the replacement. And I just wanted to make sure that what we voted on included both. This
Oh,
spring.
you mean what we voted on at
This
town meeting?
spring. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Yep. So it was just those two things.
Well, the answer to the second question is yes.
Okay.
At least my understanding from Keith is yes.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that because I
Yeah.
I
And
I
as
didn't
far as-
recall seeing it in the in what we saw. So
Okay. Okay. And as far as the 95K salary, I think that that's just, you have to read it in the context, right? Mr. Cronin had presented a package on the position and what they had defined. Remember, we had told them months before that there was ambiguity, there was solid confusion about reporting and everything. So he prepared that little package for us. In that package, he said the position would require a moderate skill set and 95K per year salary. So we never approved, what we actually approved, I think, was 85K or something like that.
okay. I just wanted to make sure it
But
was
I'm just
in the
saying that just to be
range.
clear about the minutes, right? The minutes weren't
yeah.
what we were suggesting it. So,
No, of course not. The only reason I asked the question is I wanted to make sure it was in the range and not far outside of the range. And so I couldn't recall what the settled salary was. So that's why I had just a question.
Yeah.
Again, not at all about the minutes. The minutes were fine.
Okay. Okay. So any other questions about these minutes? Okay. If not, we'll proceed to a vote to approve. And I assume, Mr. Whitaker, you're going to abstain on all these? Okay. So we'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Nersessian,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
Abstain.
Okay. And I vote yes. So those minutes are approved. So we have, what do we have anything else we want to go through tonight, or?
There was the ones Mark had done. That was another one for, I don't know if he sent it out, July 28th.
Here, let me see.
I don't
Yep.
think they were approved, or were they?
Okay, let me see. No, they couldn't have been, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
This is our first meeting since then.
yes. So, okay.
Have we reviewed it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I haven't reviewed it, but I know they're short because he took
Yep.
my lesson to heart. So I'll take a look at it right now. So this is, let me see. Let me just find them.
When was it sent? I am so sorry.
July
Okay.
28th.
Thank you.
Probably something
Mark
out
sent it out on like the 30th. He was very quick.
Yes, it was the 29th, actually, I think, right?
Okay.
So let's see. 7. No, that's not it. Hold on. 7/28. I'm trying to find it. Edited minutes. I see an email from July 29th. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there were two separate emails. Okay, let me just take a quick look. This was a short meeting anyway. Okay, minutes approval. Okay, I'm ready to entertain a motion to approve these.
I make a motion to approve the July 28th, 2020 minutes.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on the July 28th, 2020 minutes? Okay, hearing none, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Sessian,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, and now, so that's it for tonight, or do we have anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, so as I said, Mark, going forward, I know, Vin, you're tracking down, you're taking care of some of the older ones.
Yep.
What I would suggest is when either of you have something to approve, send it out on Monday, because sending it out in advance means nobody reads it until the day before anyway. So I'm just saying, make it a Monday thing. Remind the committee of what we're going to be doing. So, okay. Administrative wise, there's not really much to report. So far, things are the way they are. You know, now we have a budget, right? Things are just moving along. Let me see if I want to. Okay. I'll save this for a little bit for later, but I did want to give one update to the committee, which is that we have started getting unemployment bills, and we got one, right? And we've been told that I won't go into the details because it's not really important, but it was a larger bill as we expected, but we're still, the state has said that they're not going to do the reconciliation. We talked about claims that are not legitimate in our minds, right? The town protested certain claims and things like that. And the state has said that all the protests from anybody concerning unemployment claims will be handled with the next set of bills. So, so at the moment, you know, our kind of status with the unemployment line is still uncertain, but we did see a bigger bill for the last, you know, FY20, you know, or I shouldn't say the last, was covered March, April, and May of FY20. So, but the bottom line is that's still not sorted out. That's really the only administrative thing. I'll save comment on the budget till later, the budget process of the state. So the next thing is, as you may recall, Mr. Sparrow is now a member of the Select Board, and as such, that has created a vacancy on the Capital Subcommittee. Ms. Nersessian and I are still the two remaining members, but I wanted to put to the committee who would like to be the third, if anybody feels like joining us. If you want to get back at Mr. Alfred, you can feel free to do that, Mr. Murphy, since he's not in attendance. But
I wouldn't do that to him.
But in any case, if there's any of the four of you interested in becoming a member of the Capital Subcommittee.
I would be happy to help if nobody else wants to do it.
Okay, I think that sounds like you're volunteering. So,
Pardon the ignorance here, but
yeah.
What does it entail? How many?
Okay, it doesn't entail that much, partly because we now have Travis. If you look at the town's bylaws.
No, does Travis know?
Yes, Travis knows. If you look at the town bylaws, there's a article in there that basically says that the finance committee can form a capital subcommittee that basically works with the town administrator to handle what we've come to call the asset management spreadsheet. I'm paraphrasing the bylaw, but it basically says that we can form this subcommittee to do the capital work, to make recommendations to the greater committee and things like that. So we formed the committee about 2 years ago. And the real purpose at the time was to work with the Collins Center when the Collins Center was was helping us do our initial capital planning. Obviously, since that time, we've added a facilities manager who's doing a lot of who's now going to be contributing on the building side. And we have Travis, who's going to be an integral part of maintaining the asset management plan going forward. But we still have the capital subcommittee. The real intent of that, I wouldn't say intent, but the real purpose, so to speak, is really to work with those, Travis and Mr. Keys to make sure the asset management spreadsheet is kept up to date, and that will the goal long term is to have that asset management plan guide our recommendations for capital. Right? It's the idea is that every asset, every capital, we know it's fluid. It's not meant to be a static document, but the whole point is to have it so that we don't go into the kind of capital planning part of the year saying, okay, who wants what? We should be able to look at the asset management plan and say, here's what is due for replacement this year, that kind of thing. And it allows us, the goal is to allow us to level our capital spending so that rather than just saying, okay, we have a bunch of requests this year, we're looking more long-term at the capital, at asset life, useful life, replacement costs, and planning appropriately from the capital perspective to make sure that things are getting handled the way they should.
And Ben had reached out a few weeks ago saying that James was actually kicking off with the consultants to actually go out and do the tagging and update the capital plan. So,
which I think has been done. Mr. Keys can comment, but I think that's
super.
Been completed.
That's great. Okay, good.
Yeah, this is James Keys, facility manager. Yes, that was completed last week. Data needs to get compiled in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be available after that.
Awesome. It went okay?
Yeah, everything went really well.
Oh, super.
It was definitely a whirlwind time to get everything done, but we started in the basements and went all the way up to the attics. And we probably tagged probably 400 to 500 pieces of equipment.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's
Good.
Yay.
So,
Thanks,
the matter
James,
at hand, you want to do it, Mr. Whitaker.
I don't necessarily, I'm not against it, but it's something that I think Tim might be better suited for. Sorry, Tim.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. As I said, it doesn't entail, it's not like we meet, 17 times. We usually meet before these meetings. We usually have, And since the pandemic, we haven't met at all because it's just, we haven't had a need to, and we had Mr. Keys, we're waiting for this kind of, a lot of the dust to settle with Travis and with Mr. Keys. So anyway, so if that's the case, then I will entertain a nomination for Mr. Maxwell to join the capital subcommittee of the finance.
So
committee.
I nominate Tim Maxwell to the budget subcommittee. I mean, to the capital.
I know I keep saying the same thing because we meet with the schools all the time. Yeah.
To the capital, what's the full term?
Capital subcommittee.
Capital
Second.
subcommittee.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Session. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Session,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
I abstain.
okay, Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So congratulations, Tim. You're now our third member. And Ben's on mute laughing. Is that no? Just kidding. Yeah. So okay, good. That was item number 2 on our agenda. Okay, next up are the liaison assignments, and I did. Let me see. I didn't make any changes yet because I wanted to discuss them in open session. So there are, obviously we have to deal with Mr. Sparrow's departure in terms of the things he was responsible for. But I'll open it up to general discussion if anybody. I would say that both Michelle, Dan, and I want to maintain our school role because we've been driving that, and certainly during the pandemic, we've been meeting with them weekly, so I wouldn't want to change that up. But if anybody has any departments they'd like to cover or changes they'd like to make, then feel free to chime in now. So I guess I'll go around and start with Mr. Session. Are there any particular departments you want?
Well, so I guess I'd like to just talk a little bit, and I don't know that I want to take on the schools, but I do feel like, Ken, we've had a lot of consistency for at least the time that I've been on the finance committee. So that's 6 years. I don't know how long you guys have been the subcommittee. I do think that over time, it's good to get a fresh set of eyes on things because I think people bring, we have a diverse group on our finance committee anyway, and bringing, shifting things around, I think gives diverse perspectives on things and maybe new ideas. And anyway, that's just my perspective on that. And again, I don't know that so I'm not saying I want to take on the schools. I'm just saying that in general.
Right. Well, what I would say is, I agree. It hasn't been forever. That I'll tell you, right? I mean, I've been doing the schools for a long time. I got assigned to the schools probably within a couple of years of joining the finance committee, so I've been on it for a long time. I think we can. I think what I'd like to do is maybe get more people involved in a way. In a way to kind of train, so to speak, to get, because I think, to be honest with you, right, it took me a long time when I first got involved to get up to speed on the nuances of how, the finance for the schools work, primarily because a lot of, there's federal direct payments, there's state payments, there's, you have to understand a lot of the subtleties about the schools.
Sure.
So let me think about how we can do that in a way that doesn't present open meeting law challenges, right? It is okay for a quorum of the committee to sit in the subcommittee meetings as long as we don't deliberate. So, what I may do is say if people are interested in learning more about the schools or providing that they could attend the budget subcommittee meetings and basically listen for the most part at first until they come up to speed on things, and then we'll talk about whether they want to step in one of the roles.
Ask you, because I totally agree with Sue. I think we need to have change blood. It's worthwhile in any organization when you have people sitting and doing the same thing over and over. They get the same views and the same thoughts, and it's healthy for a group and an organization to change over. So I would say I don't see the benefit necessarily of saying, let's keep the same people. We've had the same people for 6 years, as Sue said, and probably more, I don't know. And I don't think it's healthy. I think it's necessary to change it up. I understand, yeah, we have a lot of things going on, but move one person over so that we change it up, and then you get the same training. Just because you're comfortable with the group doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing for the organization.
Okay, point taken, point taken. So what would you suggest? I mean, who would, first, I guess
No, I think we should just have, but I think you should be open that we don't keep the same people over and over.
No, I don't disagree with you. Okay, I don't disagree with you. The only reason I'm a little hesitant at the moment is because of the whole pandemic situation, right?
I agree, and I understand what you're saying, but if you have, I think the largest liaison group is the schools, so you have 2/3, you roll somebody off, and then
I get the point. So
it would be, the person would still, and probably would not say a lot of things because they're still learning everything. Okay, I understand. And I think that's the healthy way to go, as opposed to, well, we're going to have this quasi quorum.
Okay. But that was what I was going to ask, was who is interested in the schools as a liaison?
I would suggest Sue, just because,
No,
even though she says no, Sue or Tim.
Sue
And the only reason I say Tim,
Tim's
Sue,
great.
Tim, because he's got children in the school system. I'm assuming Mark doesn't, but I could be wrong.
So I don't have any, and I know
that's
so
part
I
of the
didn't bring
reason
it
why
up to roll on. So there was no sort of involvement in my
That's
comments.
okay, Sue. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. So
I want to
No,
reiterate,
honestly.
I just want to reiterate, it's not necessarily just the schools, it's a lot of them, all the committees, liaisons, but I think the school is a big portion of it.
Right, and that's the only reason I point out the schools was because of the situation we're in right now, right? But everything else I'm fine with. If people want, that's exactly why I'm saying that, let's talk about it, right? A lot of what happens is people, when I've presented this in the past, everybody looks and says, yeah, I'm fine with what I've got, and then we move on. So if you'd like, if people would like me to, I will go through and make a suggestion for moving a lot of things around, and then come back, at our next meeting and say, here's what I would propose for liaisons. If people don't want to do that now, right? If you want to make substantive changes, I've done that over the years. Like in prior years, I've come in and I've said, here's what when people have left, I've shifted things around and said, okay, here's what I'd suggest, how we fill the gaps and how we move some people around. And generally, I'll be honest with you, what guides me in those decisions is mostly experience with finance committee. For example, I tend to shift people, newer people, put them on easier things as they're coming up to speed. And then I shift them up as, if somebody leaves, I shift them into more responsible, or tougher departments, and then put the new people in underneath them. So.
And that makes sense. I totally agree. But at the same time, if you look at the committee, I'm guessing the liaisons haven't changed for a couple of years because we haven't really changed.
Well, at this point, they haven't changed for a couple of years because we haven't turned over in a couple of years. But keep in mind, Vin, that I was doing this when there was a time when I was the only one with more than like a year's experience on the committee. So
I agree. I'm not saying.
So at one point there were all neophytes in all these roles.
Yep.
Well, would it be beneficial to have us send you sort of a wish list this week, and then you could see if there's overlap in different areas, and then maybe we could talk, and I know Travis wants to get it finalized too, because he's waiting to put him in, but if it wouldn't be a problem waiting one more week, maybe we give you our feedback on things maybe we want to switch up, and then you could see how, and I'm happy to help if you want.
Right, and that's fine.
Whatever,
if that's what the majority of the committee, or if that's what everybody feels, I'm fine with that, right? I just want to say, I've just warned you, Sue, right? The one thing I've learned over the years is, if I send out something today and says, get me your suggestions for liaisons, I'll be lucky if I get 3 people responding.
Yeah, right? and that's okay. I mean, I do. So I don't mind going through the ones like tonight that I have a few that I wouldn't mind, like, again, shifting because it's new and I don't know a lot about it. I'd like to learn more, et cetera. Right. But if others do too, I didn't want to, I don't want to take up people's time.
Exactly. That's my point. Is that what I'm saying is if the answer is, okay, let's try shifting things up, I actually prefer the method of everybody sends me what they want, and then I figure something out that tries to maximize everybody's
Yep.
wants, and then
Right.
say, here's a proposal. I'm fine doing that tonight, right? I'm just saying that requires that 6 other people on the committee take a few minutes to send me an email and say, this is what I want. And I'm just saying that in the past, when I've done that, what happens is I get 2 people that say, I just want these 2, or, and then it's like, but you realize everybody's gonna get 6 or 7 assignments. So give me your top 10.
Why
Right?
don't you make a suggestion that everybody has to rank their choices, give them like a 1 to 5 of all the different liaison positions, and you pick
Okay,
them. That way it forces them to do it. So as opposed to,
that's fine. Okay. I'm fine. As I said, I'm fine with whatever will get people to, it's so if that's the case, then we'll do that.
Then we can put
Well, what do the
Dan,
others
all
think
the-
too?
all the lousy ones. So the scales,
We
the
do a
weigher.
little bit of a shakeup. I wouldn't mind us considering, we have 3 liaisons with the schools. I think should think about, should we do something similar with the select board? Like we have some homework to do there and build a better relationship with the select board. And if we had we had 3 liaisons that were kind of working as a team to support the select board, I think that would go a long way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I as I said, I'm not concerned about anything right now except the schools. The only thing is the schools. I think that we can shift anything up. I'm open to shifting anything up. I mean, I have a bunch of stuff that I've taken on over the years because people didn't want it, right? So it's not like I'm sitting here married to everything I do either, right? I'm more than happy to say if people want to take on some of these roles. It's not like I'm trying to save them all for myself. It's just that traditionally what happens is, as I said, people respond and say, I want these 3 or 4 things, and then I give them 3 other things, and nobody cares about, the cable advisory committee or something like this. And so I end up taking all these, plus a lot of them, to be fair, right? Some of them are really administrative liaisons, like things like motor vehicle fuels. It's not like you're meeting with a gas pump, right?
I'll take them.
I
like that one.
It's like you talk to Travis, and Travis says, here's what the budget is. And you say, how much are you assuming for gas and diesel or whatever? And that's it. So some of those I've taken just because I'm like, there's nothing to do. And it's just handing information to the committee, which I can do. But I agree with you entirely. As I said, the only concern I had today was the schools because of the situation we're in at the moment.
I mean, I'm very biased after working for however long, 5 years now, 6 years, Sue? Is it 6 years, really? With Chief Cassidy and the police department, like I would be sad to give it up because I feel like I understand the relationship between those different organizations and their budgets and the nuances. And I feel very comfortable approaching Chief Cassidy with his beautiful tie.
Well, see, you
Rank
have
them
to
1 and
remember,
2.
But
Rank them
you
1
have
and
to
2,
remember one
Tim.
other
Absolutely, I get it.
Right?
I totally hear your points where maybe it would benefit all of us to shake things up a little and get some fresh eyes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm fine
I
with
don't know if
that.
Chief Cassidy really needs my thoughts for a sixth year.
So you all have your homework for next week, which is go through the liaison list, rank every item 1 through 5. And what I would suggest in addition to that is name your top 5 of the one. 1 is the best, 5 is the 1 is the one you want most, 5 is the one you want least. And if you have more than 5 1s, then give me the top 5 1s. Because
So should we rank everything like 1 to 5? I would suggest, just so you get it, and then
no, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So
but I'm just saying that
everything gets
if you give me 3 1s and I want the top. I want to be able to distinguish the top 5 overall that you pick. So if you give me 10 1s, I need to know which 5 of those are the ones you want most. Or if you give me 3 1s, you got to tell me which of those plus the 2s, so to speak, are your top 5. So
And if Travis, I saw your note in the chat. If you wouldn't mind just sending out the most recent list, I think that would be fantastic just to have that for us to leverage. Plus I had to do a search today to find it, so it will be at the top of our email, which is
Right,
always
we need
helpful.
a new list. Like the list we have doesn't have facility manager and sustainability coordinator. Right.
Travis actually.
Are those separate? Would those be separate liaisons, or are those under select board?
well,
Be different liaisons, but even though they're under select board, the select board have police, fire.
Right. I would say we'd want a liaison for those because when it comes to budget preparation time, right, the facilities manager's going to have to prepare a budget.
Yep.
So.
Well, and we'll be heavily involved in capital too, I would presume.
Yes.
Good idea, Michelle.
Okay, Travis, you want?
Does he know he's on mute?
I was going to say you're not. We're not hearing you, Travis.
He said.
Oh, okay. So that's what the wait is. He's trying to get his audio going.
Okay.
Okay. So in the meantime, Mr. Sparrow, if you're there, he disappeared.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Okay. And now we see.
Oh, Travis and stereo.
Travis.
This is weird.
Travis's twin is here too.
I have.
Yeah, mute one of them.
Get one of them.
Speakers also.
All right. So, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Travis, and then we'll get you
right
back.
now. And I was speaking to Sue about this. There's a few, about 7 to 9 committees that don't have really a staff person, and the chair of it. Think smaller committees that have personal emails. So I just don't want to add their personal emails to the list without speaking to them. And also, I want to make sure that if they want a town email, they have access to it. If they don't and they want to keep it private, I have a couple options I've talked to Chris Mayo about. So I'm going to send the list out, and you'll see the highlighted yellow ones that just say you would contact me, and then I would sort of set you up to speak with them. Ideally, we would then come up with a process that takes me out of it, so you just could go directly to them. So I'll send that out. And then to Michelle's point, I have a list here on the bottom. Right, so the sustainability coordinator was one also that we may want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Town hall septage is one that's coming to has a short span, but is actually coming to a head probably in the next year. TAC is a new group. The town forest. So some of these I think we can discuss, but I don't have select board liaisons for them because they voted the list as it was last year. So we could discuss them for both groups, really. But I'll send this list out, and if that helps or there's any questions, just let me know.
That would help. And Travis, just my 2 cents. Make sure that nobody's using personal emails, even if they want to, right? For 2 reasons. One is for public records tracking, right? We need to have them on town email. And the other reason is more practical, which is the issue I ran into with the Board of Assessors, which is, the town has a website, their contact things through that website. I didn't know for 3 months that I was sending mail to a black hole, so to speak, when I was trying to reach the assessors because none of them were checking their town emails. So I think again, this is my opinion, but as a town, I think we want to really make sure that anybody doing town business is doing it through town email. So.
Right. So I think just for an example, like cable television has a rep who rolls up and does his business every 3 years. It may be more of a headache, and I don't know if he was offered it and chose not to or not. So it's a conversation I just plan on having with each of them. But you're right. I mean, if they're going to be doing consistent business, they should for their own protection as well.
Yeah. And the other thing, just as an FYI for things like that, think about what we did with the sustainability coordinator, right? We created a generic mailbox for sustainability that he monitors, right? So that's the other approach for some of these committees that, where people, contacts that have very little to do, that they, as you said, once every couple of years, they do something, right? Maybe we could do that instead of setting up a personal email for town email for them. You set up a bucket email, so to speak, for that function, and then just say, okay, you just use this for when you do town business, and then if the person changes, we don't have to go through the infrastructure hassle of setting up new emails and all that. So,
good point.
Okay. So if that's the case, then you have your charge for next meeting, liaison list. You saw, as I said, 1 to 5, 1 being the top, and make sure that I can distinguish the top 5 choices. Okay. And I'll try to put together a new liaison list. Travis will send out the updated list shortly. Now, Mr. Sparrow had a comment he wanted to make on the budget, the capital subcommittee. So, Mr. Sparrow, you want to go ahead and...
Thank you. So last night at the select board meeting, we took up the select board capital policy. It was a very brief conversation because Tina was not there. So John and I just had a very brief exchange. And part of that policy includes some language about the capital subcommittee. And I'd like to request a meeting with the capital subcommittee soon, like in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Because I'd like to try to I'd like to get that process to be inclusive of the capital subcommittee and to be a little more clear. I think one of the things that is happening is the capital subcommittee says that this is how to do things, the select board saying how to do things, and I think I'd just like us to all be singing from the same sheet of music, so that way it's a lot easier and our department head knows exactly who they're supposed to go to, they know where they're supposed to go and how it's supposed to work. And I just think it would be better if we just sat down, capital subcommittee, Travis, my partner in crime in hair care, and it's too bad we can't have Vin, although he's back on our shores. He's no longer in Hawaii or in London. But I'd like to have a meeting so that way we can just sort of have a discussion about what the policy should look like, and we're all talking about the same policy, because I don't think it's going to be it won't be effective, in my opinion, if it's just the select board's policy and other boards aren't on board and feeling comfortable with it. So that's my request. So whenever it works for you, you let me know, and I'll be there either by Zoom or in person, whatever.
Okay. Does the pre-meeting time work for both of you? In other words, as you know, we used to meet ahead of the finance meetings, either at 6 or 6:30. Does that time work for both of you if we were to meet before our next FinCom meeting?
You're asking Ben and Travis, right?
Yes, Ben and Travis.
And obviously Tim, because he hasn't.
Yes, and Tim, because you're the new. Good.
Next
Okay.
Tuesday is going to be a little hard for us because we.
Yeah,
have
well, I think we may avoid meeting next Tuesday because it's hard for you, because we know what's going on Tuesday.
Yeah, we have that Lowland Street meeting next Tuesday night, so that's going to take up the bandwidth. But otherwise, yes, I can do that. I don't know about Travis, but I can.
Okay, good.
Well,
so I'll obviously, as you know, go ahead, Sue.
Well, I was just going to offer, and I don't know if you guys want to meet Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but do you want to try for Wednesday next week? Or Ben, is it better to push it off? I know you said within the next couple of weeks. So would you rather try for sometime next week, or move it to the following?
I'd like to try to do it as soon as we can, because we are in a compressed timeline for October. So I'd rather at least have the conversation, and if there's more work to be done, we can do it, and we have the time to do it, and we're not trying to push up against some of the language in the policy includes 60-day deadlines and 45-day deadlines, and that turns into late August. So I'd like to meet sooner.
Well, does next Wednesday work for you guys?
What time? 6:30?
Well, evening, I don't know, 6, 6:37, whatever time works for you guys.
If we're doing Zoom, I can.
Yeah, it would be Zoom. It would be Zoom. We're not going to meet in person yet, so.
Okay. I can make it work.
I think so.
Okay. What about you, Sue?
Yeah, and earlier the better, actually. If you wanted to go earlier, I'm okay to do that too, because we're.
Okay.
Wednesdays are great for me, so anytime really Wednesday.
Okay. What about you, Tim?
I can do Wednesday at 6. Wednesday at 7, I have another Zoom meeting.
Okay. So it'll be earlier on Wednesday. Yes. Okay. So that's fine. Then I'll get something posted for next Wednesday at 6. Does that work?
Wonderful.
Okay.
And I'll send everyone. I'll send the three of you the policy as it reads now, and get your feedback. And then I just a couple other things. I'll send you an email in the next day or so that just sort of outlines my thoughts, and then you can throw cold water on it. Do whatever you want to do. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So anything else before we close out those two topics? So anything else on liaison assignments or capital subcommittee? Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Can I actually ask
go ahead,
a question
Dan.
about liaisons?
You're turning into Dan now? Doing the Dan thing where nobody says anything. You say, well, actually, right at the end. So go ahead.
My question is that I'm putting this really far ahead, but the facilities manager, one of the things that I think we're hoping to do is to try to work towards getting him a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean I don't know what it's going to look like. But I think the thinking could be that it hits a lot of different departments.
Yes.
So I'm not sure. and this is a question for the committee, this is for everybody, is it something that, you know, everybody wants to be involved in some way? Is it something that one person takes it and takes the lead? Because, I mean, he's got, you know, the police have facility, you know, there's fire,
Right.
there's library, there's parks, there's a lot of pieces. And so it would hit a lot of departments and by extension, a lot of liaisons.
I think step one in that process would be for Travis to go through the budgets of each of the departments and identify the funds that are used for facility maintenance, right? And identify whether they should be staying in that budget or moving to facilities. In other words, there may be something like custodial services where they have a service that comes in and cleans the floors. That's not, you know, Craig doesn't need, I mean, you know, James doesn't need to do that, right? But if there's something where they've got budgets for, you know, maintenance or whatever that James is going to be taking from now, and then we should at least, I mean, I think that was, as you remember, one of the discussion points we had when we talked about facilities was the idea that we could take some of that funding out that is now distributed and centralize it and become more efficient. So, you know, go ahead, Travis.
So I would just say I've started that process, right? There is the one large public buildings. The trick with that one is that it's not all public buildings, right? Munis, right, which is the accounting and HR platform, is paid out of it. So I've sort of started to try to deconstruct. This is a time where I would just point out what we also want to do is on the quarterly update we plan on bringing to the Finance Committee, we would have James Keese bring sort of what is going on that's sort of outside of the budget. That would obviously be easier if everything was under him. One thing I would mention right now, in the spirit of sort of keeping everything on the Finance Committee's radar, is a $10,000 hit we're taking at the police station on something that James is overseeing. So in like the quarterly update that we would plan from James Keese right now, he'd be saying, you know, within the police budget, we have this $10,000 hit. We think, you know, the budget can probably sustain it for the year, but this is in Q1, so we want it on your radar. If it were all under him, that's fine. I think, you know, there's always the trick of then if you put it all under James, then you have to deconstruct it by departments when you want to know what departments are spending what. So I think we got to find a balance. Mm-hmm. But I have already started that process, just sort of to the way the conversation's going.
Yeah, and then that's why I said, like, I don't think it's that we take every cent and give it to James. I think it's we identify what things should be under his purview, what things should be under the individual department purview, and make that split. From the financial standpoint, right? From the financial standpoint, you weren't here, but the discussion we had was exactly this: was you can't hire a facilities coordinator and then have no ability to run the facilities. And we looked at it and said, if you hire the position, we will gather the funds from these other budgets, because the whole intent is to offload these budgets of these responsibilities. So that's kind of the process we're outlining is, okay, let's go to step two. Now that we have a facilities manager, let's identify these pieces that we want to take and pull into that budget to allow to give them the resources that are needed.
Right.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Sparrow?
Done.
It actually will be interesting. Sorry, Ben, but it will be very interesting to see the amount that's actually going to the facilities, because right now it's bundled, right?
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to whether it stays or pulls out, just to understand what that component is. Yeah. I think will be very informative. And again, sorry, Ben.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Murphy. Go ahead.
Ben had sent an email to you and me, Ken, about a question of employment hours over in the town clerk's office with the pending November election.
Yeah.
I know it's not on the agenda tonight, but could we add that to the agenda for our next meeting? And
we could.
I'm going to bring Liz, or if you guys just want to have a position.
Yeah, I will say this. I will, because there's a personnel component to this. I want to limit discussion on it right now, but I will say that Travis and Ben and I have spoken about that already.
Oh, okay.
And not to be fair, it wasn't to exclude you. It was because when I got the email, I went to them and said, "What's this all about? Do I need to put it on the agenda?" Right? And part of that discussion was, you know, that email covered a confluence of several different issues. So I kind of went to them and said, we should really separate this out into each issue. And because some of them are personnel related that we shouldn't have anything to do with. Others are finance related that we should have something to do with, right?
We don't have to get into it now, but maybe.
So I'm just saying that they are doing that separation. So,
Perfect. Okay, good.
okay, Vin, you had something.
Yeah, just to go back to we were talking about the facilities manager, I think we got to bring the town accountant, and I'm sure Travis knows, just to figure out the end game, how this is all has to be showing on the different reports and different financial, when we break out, bringing things into facilities and then breaking it back. And just knowing, being an accountant and dealing with all different reports and everything, we just have to make sure we're cognizant of how the information is being compiled and then how it has to go out. So it might say, hey, let's group it all into facilities, but in the long end, everything has to be separated into the different categories, and we should keep it that way. So we have to keep that in mind.
Can I just say to that point, I think, do you mind?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. So just to that point, I think you're right. One of the things that we want to do to group things together is to see, let's say everything we're paying for cleaning contracts across all buildings, see if we get economies of scale for one contract town-wide. But at the same point, a contract for town-wide cleaning services, as an example, I'm not saying that that's one that we definitely want to do, would then need to be, we could then potentially charge to each department, but also have it all sort of under one umbrella. And then we could track all of the sort of everything that's been charged to cleaning costs over the years, and what is done under a unified procurement. So, I mean, we have those abilities, right? All these things have been tracked through it. And that's the only way I want to pump the brakes. And I think that's where this conversation has gone. It may not be to just pull everything out of budgets, put it under James, but it may be to have control over what's being spent in some of those categories under James. And then he's charging it out to departments so that the information stays consistent. It might be somewhere in between.
Right. And one other thing I'd add on that is, personally, my own opinion on it is, I want to make sure that we see what's being spent, and to me, like, I don't care if you sat there and said, we're pulling it all out of the budget, we're sticking it into facilities, and we're saying this is what it is, and we're just going to, or whether you say every budget that has a facilities component has a new line item in it called facilities. And that is the budget that is owned by James for that department. Okay. Then at least there's uniformity. The problem we have now is that you go into one budget and it's called maintenance. You go into another budget, it's, some other name, right? So we, as a finance committee, over years of experience, get to know, okay, well, that line is their building cost line. And then, as you said, some of it's in public buildings, right? And some of public buildings has nothing to do with facilities, right? So to me, the logistics, I'm open to any proposal. What I want to be able to do, though, is look at a given budget and say, if we are going to keep money in there, say, this is the money that James controls for maintenance of that, or whatever, for facilities associated with that department. And it's easily identifiable and uniform across all budgets. Because then the easy thing to do is to say, okay, if you want to see how much the facilities manager, quote unquote, budget is, you add up all those facilities lines, say this is what he has under his purview, right? But then when we're looking at a budget, we don't have to guess which lines have embedded facilities functions in them. So, go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, so you said most of what I actually wanted to comment on. And I'd love to see what Travis comes up with. I think just knowing what the amount is, and then ultimately we're hoping for some savings by doing it centrally. So being able to sort of see that will be helpful.
Yeah. And by the way, I just, okay, Chief Cassidy, I'll let you go and then I'll make a general comment on this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a department head, I would encourage you to also involve department heads in these discussions.
Well, of course, because, that's Travis's job.
Okay, well, I've heard a lot of opinions back and forth, but as the end users who currently have buildings and who currently need to get things fixed, philosophically, there's a difference between something small that I can manage myself, as opposed to needing to bother James, have him come down, have him do an analysis, determine whether or not he needs to call an outside vendor, or whether I can literally walk across the street to the hardware store, buy a part, and fix the problem. Mm-hmm. So I'm just asking, don't take my whole budget and give it to James, because that's not going to be very efficient in terms of some departments being able to solve their own problems.
Right. Well, I think that what has come out of this discussion is it's not going to be an all or nothing thing. The question is, how is it partitioned? And maybe it's not partitioned, as you said, maybe the answer is you don't take any money out, but you just designate it uniformly on every budget as a facilities line. And then you can spend it. But my opinion on that is leave it to Travis, right? As Sue said, right? Let's see what he comes up with for a proposal. Our communication in the past on this as a committee has been, we really want to see where the money's going, and we want to have somebody who's in charge of looking at those economies of scale type of things in the facilities. Because frankly, half of the department heads, if not more, in town, they're not hired. You weren't hired as fire chief to be the maintenance man, right, so to speak. So to me, when Leslie has to come in from the library and say, I was overseeing, boiler replacement, I'm sitting there going, it's great that she can do that, and I'm not taking anything away from her for doing that. But at the same time, we didn't hire her to be overseeing boiler replacement, right? I'd rather have her focusing on running the library and let Mr. Keese, the facilities manager, be handling that kind of stuff. So I think that we have to wait to see what Travis proposes. I think it's clear what our intent is here, and we'll leave it up to him to come back with a plan.
Yeah, well, one is on the financials, which is what we care about, and how you operationalize it with Chief Cassidy and Mr. Heats is between them and sort of how they want to structure it. That has nothing to do with us, nor should it. So
exactly right, and that's why I said I defer to, that my presumption would be that anything Travis is going to propose is going to be something he'll vet with the department heads ahead of time. So, okay. And I would point out that this discussion, before anybody claims it wasn't on our agenda, it is a matter relating to the FY21 budget, because we're discussing how we're going to be reporting things for FY21. So just to be clear, we're not discussing anything that wasn't already covered. So anybody have anything else on this? Ben, are you happy now? Okay, good. Okay, so let's move on. We covered the first couple of things. We kind of segued into number 5 there, but we'll go back to that in a second. But since the chief is wearing his nice clothing, as we just saw, I'll get him to give us our COVID update from the financial perspective. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the discussion that your committee just had with regards to the way things are tracked and how they are entered into Munis and what that allows in terms of reports to be generated and analysis to be made will really set the stage for some of the discussion that the town administrator and I would have in a few minutes with regards to the CARES Act funds. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the 10,000-foot view, currently we have no active cases in Holliston. We are reporting a total of 64 cases since March, 62 having recovered, 2 COVID-related fatalities. And that's kind of the boots on the ground experience where we are. In terms of supplies going into a potential second wave of surge 1 or a second surge this fall, we are very well situated for PPE. Between what I was able to purchase, what I was able to acquire, grants, and other resupplies from state agencies, we are very well situated going into the fall.
Okay, good. Now, do we foresee? I ask you this, I think, every time. Given what's going on in the rest of the country, are we seeing an impact to our ability to get stuff, so to speak, at this time?
Yes, there are still supply chain issues with the surges that are occurring in certain states around the country. But what I have in stock will certainly see me through the next several months. But right now we're watching the prices so that anything else that I need to purchase, we can sort of wait to see if the prices come back down again on certain items, because there's a lot of price gouging taking place right now.
Now that raises a very good question that I hadn't thought about, but I will now. The Massachusetts is part of this newly announced consortium, right? Do we expect to benefit kind of from that in the sense that we get supplies from MEMA, and MEMA may be part of it? Like, I'm just saying, do we expect that we can alleviate some of this price pressure through this purchase alliance that's been formed?
So there are a couple different models of distribution right now. MEMA is considered to be a second tier because we're this many months into the public health crisis. The expectation is that we'll use our regular supply chains, and when we can't avail ourselves of those, or when the delays are too significant and we're down to less than a week's worth of supply of a particular item, we can tap into the MEMA inventory. So the purchasing collaborative that the Commonwealth is a part of would allow the MEMA inventory to be sourced and priced at volume discounts. We're not buying from MEMA. There are cooperative purchasing agreements that we're a part of. Early on, I did get some things from one of the public health regions, and for that we were charged because it was from their strategic stockpile, and so in order for them to restock that stockpile, they charged us and every other agency that took advantage of taking things out of it a resupply cost. So will the cooperative purchasing agreement that the Commonwealth is a part of for bulk purchasing help? Yes, but they haven't made that available to us as a sub-grantee or as allowing us to buy off of their purchasing power.
Okay, I was just curious. Okay, so that's good. So expense-wise, we're still in decent shape. No giant expenses. We can talk about the care spreadsheet in a minute, but I'm just saying okay, but sounds like we're good. Anybody have any questions about this? And then we'll move on to the spreadsheet. Okay.
I do.
So
I do.
Go
My
ahead.
hand's raised. My hand is
Oh,
raised.
I didn't see it. I see it blends in with your window. It was tough to see. So go ahead.
I don't know how it shows up on the screen. On my little icon, it shows. Chief, we were at 56 cases for well over a month, June into mid-July, and then it sort of escalated. And now I know it looked like there was a true up between 63 and now we have 64 cases. But is there something that you see in terms of a trend, in terms of why we're starting to tick upward now that we should just be aware of? Just obviously, the more cases, the more costs, and so I'd appreciate any thoughts you have, if you have any, that is a sort of a trend or.
So our uptick correlated with an increase in cases around the Commonwealth.
Okay.
In terms of our contact tracing, there really wasn't a linkage between those additional cases between 56 and 64. Of those, one was at a group home. The rest were at single family homes. There were not any known cases where it was duplicate within one address. So those were truly 8 separate addresses within our 19.2 square miles.
Okay.
And so we were very diligent in checking our records, both against those who attended the annual town meeting and those who attended the outdoor graduation ceremony. And we were very closely watching in the weeks following those 2 large gatherings to see if we needed to do any additional follow-up related to any matches between addresses of individuals who attended one or more of those events and positive hits on the line list from Maven.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of, it's not like some of the things that you would have seen the governor drawing attention to in at least 2 of his press conferences, where he focused on things like an unauthorized football camp and a graduation party and a wedding reception. There was none of those sorts of examples. All of ours were all isolated cases, which as sectors of the economy continue to reopen, as people continue to get out and interact with more people, that's where these cases were coming from. There wasn't one epicenter for those 8 new cases over the course of 3 weeks.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so while we're talking about the COVID, you guys all, everybody on the committee should have received the email I forwarded from Travis with the spreadsheet. Just to give you the quick background on that, one of the, as you know, the schools are contemplating various reopening scenarios, and one one of the things that the liaisons have been discussing with the school budget subcommittee is the financial implications of these different scenarios and what we might be looking at. We don't have the final numbers yet. They're still, contemplating different things, and we give them some guidance on different approaches, but I'm sure we'll be meeting with them in the coming weeks to discuss it. But one of the topics that came up there was, because the current state of things is that the federal government has taken no further action on additional aid, the CARES Act money runs out at the end of December. So obviously the expectation is the feds will at some point pass another aid package that will extend into next year. But at the moment, there isn't one. So we had guided the schools to consider kind of those two pieces separately, what it takes to get to December 31, what it takes to get through the rest of the year starting January 1 of 2021. And when we were discussing that and we were trying to, they're still working those numbers. When we were having that discussion, one of the possibilities was, well, what's available from that 1.3 million? Do we still have money available that could be used to help with some of these COVID costs? And what basically we discovered, and I talked to Travis about this last week, was we knew where the money, we knew what was spent because Sharon was keeping track of what was actually expended. And of course, the chief is tracking, FEMA reimbursements and things like that with her. But we didn't have a nice consolidated spreadsheet that said, hey, everything that the select board has approved, this is the dollar amount that they've approved so far. So how much, from our perspective, when we operate, as you know, anything we approve is encumbered until the expense is made. And then if there's a delta, the money's returned to the fund or some such thing, but we start with the encumbrance. So over the last week, through various discussions, Travis put together that spreadsheet, which I think is an excellent summary of what we were looking for, which shows, as you see, it shows everything the select board has approved in terms of dollar value. So what they have approved that's out there. It has other columns that show what we've actually spent, what has been reimbursed. And as just to refresh everybody's memory, the act requires that you get reimbursement from FEMA for FEMA eligible expenses. But FEMA is almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, it's like a post reimbursement. You send them the bill and they tell you whether they're going to reimburse, they send you 75% of the cost. That's kind of how it works, right, Chief? So they don't give you the money in advance, put it that way.
Oh yes, it's unlike the $1.3 million which was deposited into our account. You need to incur the expense, and then you need to submit proof of expense. They need to verify that it was an eligible expense, and then they will reimburse you up to 75% of eligible expenses. However, the guidance from the Division of Administration and Finance in the Commonwealth is that the 25% local match, which is normally the responsibility of the municipality, for this emergency, the community is allowed to use a portion of our 1.3 million as the 25% match. So there should be no obligation for the town in terms of eligible expenses based on our spending.
Right. So the gist of this is, because of the way the process works, and I'll pick numbers that are round just to show you an example. If somebody went to the chief today and said, I have a $100,000 expense that I believe is CARES Act eligible, the chief, let's say he looks at it and says, yes, this meets the A&F guidance, and it also meets the FEMA requirement, FEMA guidance, so this could go to FEMA as well. The request goes to the select board. The select boards, let's say they approve it, they say, okay, we're okay with this $100,000. Well, at that moment they approve it, the select board does not know and cannot know that what amount FEMA is going to reimburse from that, right? FEMA may look at it and say, totally not eligible, then you're on the hook for the $100,000, which would come out of the CARES money. Or they could say, we'll pay 75% of that, so we'll give you 75,000, and then only 25 comes out of the CARES money. So the minute the select board approves an expenditure, so to speak, from that CARES Act fund, it essentially, it's spent, it's potentially spent, right? So if they were to approve more than 1.3 million of projects, the risk is that if we didn't get the reimbursements we were counting on, we'd have a problem, right? So that's what Travis's spreadsheet, Travis worked with the chief and they put together that, because my concern was, we need to know at any given moment in time, how much capacity we have of that 1.3 million. And it can go up, right? If we're at 500,000 today, it could go up to 600,000 tomorrow if an expense that was approved gets reimbursed and we don't need the full amount from the fund, right? So
Just to
that's
that-
go ahead, Travis.
Just to that point, because I don't want to take too much credit because this was most of the chief's work. But also,
Well, I got it from both of you, so I'm giving you both.
yeah, no, absolutely. So what we sent to was what was requested, which is to say what has been approved, right? And so the next step as we go ahead, and this is what I was saying to Ken, was however frequently the group is going to want this. So I'm just going to give an example that's not FEMA related because I think the chief has explained the FEMA process. That reimbursement will be requested at some point, and that will give more clarity as well. But just for the most recent example was the clerk asked for $4,000 for a ballot box. That, since there's no FEMA component, is pretty straightforward. In reality, that it's probably going to cost more than $2,000. So on the sheet there, you see the $4,000 essentially approved by the select board. Once we have the actual bill and we know that we're not going to expend anything more of that $4,000 request, we can true that up and then have an actual column as well that's going to sort of show as we go ahead. So it will get a little bit more complicated as we go, but what Ken wanted the finance committee to see was what the select board has approved, and that's what we put together for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Vin.
Can you just clarify, when do we have to spend all this money by? Is it the end of
December
the year, or
31st.
do they give us an extension?
No, it's December 31st. Right now, it's December 31st.
Both the FEMA and the CARES Act money?
No, FEMA's a little different. The CARES Act, that, as the chief said, right, FEMA has programs like this. We've gotten reimbursed from FEMA for snowstorms over the years, right? So FEMA has a program for dealing with certain emergencies that are independent of the CARES Act. The CARES Act allows us to pay the municipal piece from federal funds. So that piece of it goes away at December 31. So after December 31, we can still do certain FEMA reimbursements where we're eligible for certain expenses that they allow, but then we would have to make up the 25% or more municipal piece.
So to clarify my understanding, I just want to understand though, what we're doing now for the time being is encumbering the CARES Act money until we know for a fact we're going to get reimbursed for the FEMA money. Because I'm looking at the spreadsheet and we're saying, okay,
yes,
the total is 629. We have less 687 available for the CARES Act. When are we going to, because of that, are we encumbering too much money? And when are we going to put a reimbursement in for the 124,000 or so?
Well, the reimbursements, right, as the chief said, right, and they can speak to it if they want to, but the reimbursements go in when the expenses occur, right? When he gets the bill, he sends it to FEMA. If it's a FEMA eligible expense, he sends it to them. Then they make a determination as to whether they're, with what and how, whether they're going to and how much they're going to pay.
I see a little asterisk on the spreadsheet. FEMA reimbursement not yet requested.
So in terms of the process, this is Chief Cassidy. The normal way for a snowstorm is there's a specific period that is covered by the federal disaster declaration. Snowstorm occurs, it goes from March 13th to March 15th. The community designates which 48 or 72-hour period we wish to use for our application. And so the bills come in, they are distinct. We know that the incident is over. We submit the bills. A year later, we get reimbursement. The period of performance for this disaster is much, much longer. So there will be multiple opportunities for us to make application for reimbursement. It's not rolling applications where every time we get an invoice, we send it to FEMA. There's a cumbersome process we need to go through, and so we'll need to bundle it. And what I anticipate doing is probably doing those on the quarterly basis that will coincide with the A&F reporting requirements, because A&F just issued guidance last Friday with regards to when they want reporting on the CARES funds that they've distributed to us. So it would make a lot of sense for me to do my FEMA reimbursements submissions based on those same quarterly reporting periods. And in terms of what the spreadsheet that we're looking at, and I know, Ken, based on comment that I'd seen in one of your emails, there's a little bit of question as to the different categories, and some of them seem duplicative. So there are a couple columns that are missing. And so there used to be a column which talked about incurred or munis or spent or things like projected, because what you're seeing in that spreadsheet is really additions that have been made to a working document that I had back in the spring. Because what we did was we put out the request to the individual departments and we said, you know, what have you spent so far? And what are you anticipating spending in the following categories? And I gave them all of the A&F eligible categories for CARES expenses through December 30th. And some departments were really good, and you know, they were able to tell me this is how much we've submitted to the accountant already. Others, I was able to run a report, and then some were really good at visioning and saying, this is what I'm likely going to spend between now and the end of December. Others really weren't good at those projections. So there have been things that have come up after the application was made to the state that certainly we had the headroom for to be able to absorb, but they hadn't anticipated them. So that's why, for example, I know the one that you specifically called out, Ken, under police, there were two separate lines called miscellaneous. In the column that's hidden right now, one of them was expenses up to June when we made the application, and the other one was anticipated through the end of the year. And miscellaneous was something that incorporated several different categories, including cleaning and disinfecting of public buildings, PPE, and then the overtime was called out separately because that had already been incurred. So that's just to sort of explain why it is that as you look down the sheet, which is listed by department, there are certain categories or certain departments that have a lot more specificity to their line, and others just sort of are all bundled into one, because a department head may have given me 5 or 6 different types of expenses that, because this originally was just a working document that I was using to come up with a number to recommend to the board to ask for A&F for our phase 1 eligible amount before they decided to ask for the entire 1.3 million. It's just we've added additional rows to it in the ensuing weeks, and we're still trying to figure out how to find the balance between actual posted to munis versus what has been obligated by the board through votes. And I anticipate that this spreadsheet and the report that Travis will be providing to you on a regular basis and the board this is going to be an iterative process. We're going to find out what works best and how we can capture actual expenses plus projected expenses plus how much of that is 75-25, how much of that is 100% CARES. We're getting there. We've made a lot of progress in the last week. I expect that in another 2 weeks that this will look very different, but we'll give you even more information than you have right now.
Okay, great. Okay, Ms. Zimmer,
Thank you. No, can I just finish up my question?
Oh, I thought you were done.
No, my concern was specifically around us encumbering too much, since we do have such a short timeline of spending the money. And I think I would be hesitant to say, okay, our balance is 687, when it really isn't. It's close to 800, a little over 800,000, because we're assuming, and probably rightfully so, we're going to have the 124 go to FEMA. By showing it earlier as 687, I think it has a different thought in people's mind and spending the money. And I know what happens at the end of the time. We're going to have all this money left over. And not that we want to spend unless we have a reason to, because that would be not correct. But I'm sure we have reasons to spend money for the.
Okay, well, I was just going to say I will add one comment to that, and I will say, if your concern is that we're not going to spend the entire thing, I will tell you that you don't have to worry. I'm just looking at the preliminary numbers from the schools. They're going to need a lot more than what we have.
Schools. Okay, the schools.
Okay, so Ms. Zimmer, you had a question.
Well, one of my concerns was just what Vin mentioned, but also when do you start hearing about the FEMA reimbursement? Is that like a rolling thing where you start hearing one thing at a time, or is it they tell you all at once?
So it would be based on each of my applications. So I've got a report that's due for the period ending June 30th. That has to get into A&F for September 25th. So it would be very easy to do a report to ANF for the period ending June 30th and a submission to FEMA for reimbursement for the period ending June 30th at the same time, because that way I'm running the reports for the same periods. I've got all of the right categories. So once I make the application to FEMA, a project specialist will review it. They'll make any tweaks and modifications. And then usually, especially on a fairly large project like this, I would expect that I usually have a status update within usually 3 to 4 weeks of submission. They've hired a lot of temporary staff to be able to process these applications because, again, 50 states in the United States all are eligible under this federal declaration. So each municipality has the opportunity to submit for FEMA reimbursement under the Stafford Act. So they've got a lot of project specialists that they need to bring on board to process these applications.
Okay, and then another question was, I know that the Board of Health was operating under separate grant money. Do you know how they're doing with their money? Are they going to have, I don't see them listed on this list. Are they doing all right with their money?
Yeah, so that is a difficult issue to answer directly. They did receive 2 separate allocations from the Commonwealth specific to boards of health. In the aggregate, I want to say it was between $11,000 and $12,000 total. The majority of that they were using for their nursing consultant, but then
right, for the tracing.
Pardon?
They were using that for the tracing, the contact tracing, right?
Yes, correct. For surveillance and for tracing. But then they had other money that they were trying to spend down to replace PPE that they used, because initially they took some of their stockpile and were making it available to businesses and making it available to folks on the rail trail and distributing it to anybody who needed it. So that was their stockpile in anticipation of flu clinics. So they were trying to spend down some of that money on PPE to prepare for flu clinics this fall. As I looked at all of the 280 or so expenses that have been put in Munis so far, I only found 1 for Board of Health. So this would be, to my point earlier about trying to reconcile what's been spent versus what this working document spreadsheet was projecting would be spent. There is no Board of Health row in that working spreadsheet. So we're going to have to capture that in subsequent reports, because one of the charges for Salmon VNA got charged to the CARES Act, which is an appropriate use of the funds, but that was the first one, but it hadn't been anticipated as part of the application that the board approved to go to ANF back in June.
Okay, I'll give them a call tomorrow. I'll follow up on that too.
I'll be interested to hear their answer, because I'd love to get an answer as well.
All right, because I just didn't know how endless this grant money of theirs was, because I see 64 cases that have to be followed up, and then, you were talking about them, calling. In my mind, I'm thinking of the money and the, so I will give them a call. Okay, thank you.
Good luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stu?
Yeah, I just wanted.
I can see your hand being raised on the screen.
Good. I just wanted to reiterate what Vin said. I also think that it would be helpful to see, and I'm presuming, Vin, you wanted the 505-069 brought over, correct? To be taken from the 1317?
Yes. I mean,
versus the total of the 629. Yeah, I think it would be helpful just to see it that way, if that would be possible in the spreadsheet, because I think that really sort of tells that story, and then the FEMA sort of seems to be separate, and it's a separate reimbursement.
Absolutely. I think the next time you see this, to the chief's point, we'll have the actual column against these. And so some of the things, like I was just trying to give the most simplistic one, which is the $4,000 ballot box.
Yeah.
The 2,000 is going to be probably closer to the number. So the next version of this, I'd like to have that column back that the chief referenced, just to show, and here are the actuals. Then we can start to release some of, of what was originally, obligated or approved, but is not going to actually be spent, and get to a real number, which is going to be higher than this. We want to, as requested, just have the sort of the most conservative number at this point, but it will begin to sort of get more clarity as we add that information in.
Yeah, and just the one point I wanted to make about this was the reason I wanted that 687 number was my concern was that because we do not at the moment we have very limited financial flexibility, right? So my concern was we have to be a little bit cautious about approving more than $1.3 million worth of expenses until we start getting reimbursements, right? And a good example of this would be, we can contemplate at a future meeting, is if you look at the chief's timeline that he just outlined for FEMA reimbursement, right? What's going to happen for our Q4 expenses when they get bundled in Q4, submitted in Q1 of next year when the CARES Act has expired, and may or may not get reimbursed a month later, right, 3 or 4 weeks later, right? So the issue to me with knowing these amounts is a timing one, right? We've got to make sure that the select board isn't over obligating the money, but at the same time, we've got to keep track of what we expect reasonably to be reimbursed. So it's a balancing act is my point, but we can't just presume that we're going to say, okay, we have a huge amount of capacity because we're going to get 75% of all these things back, right? Because then should that not happen, we as a town are on the hook for that, and we'd have to find the money. So we do have to do this kind of balance there. Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, what will happen if you do that, we're not going to spend enough money. You said, well, we have the schools, and I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how much they have coming down the pike. And probably
I would guess, again, I don't want to throw out numbers because I'll leave that to them to discuss, but I'm just saying that the numbers they were talking about, the reason I needed to know what the capacity was because all of us agreed that it would blow the entirety of the CARES money. Okay. And that's why I'm saying, like, the reality of this situation is I don't see how it goes unspent because the schools' needs are going to be, the schools' needs are likely going to require additional funds from us, which I don't know at this point how we're going to do that. Right. But that's I think that the challenge, so to speak, will be to try to fit what the schools need into whatever, every dime that's available, if we get to that point where we have money to be spent.
I would suggest you recognize, or you tell them they need to get the number at least somewhere, so at least it's a holding thing on the spreadsheet.
I think they will. I think that they might have done that already. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay.
To that end, we had an excellent coordination meeting yesterday between school and town administrator, chair of the select board, myself, just to talk about the different sources of federal funding that are available, what the constraints are on the different sources of funding, the period of performance for those different sources of funding. So I do anticipate, based on that meeting, that we will be getting an ask, per se, that would be brought through me to the board so that we can continue this planning appropriately and not try and figure this out through a couple journal entries on December 28th. I think this is something that in the coming months, as their reopening plans, continue to develop and are implemented, I am confident that there will be times where they will come with appropriate requests that can be covered by the funds that the board has oversight of, because the funds that they have oversight of have many fewer restrictions and don't require matches. So there's a lot of different opportunities for federal funds to be used, not all of which comes under the jurisdiction of the board that I report to.
Right. So the school grants are also there too, right? So the DESI ones that go to the school and are managed by the school committee, that's a separate animal, and then they sort of have the flexibility to come to the chief, as he just said. So those conversations are ongoing. But I think the point that Vin is making, that we don't want to be left December 31st with the possibility of turning back some of the 1.3 is absolutely on our radar.
And I would just say that, you know, my 20-year history as a department head, I've proven that I can spend money. So I can assure you that I will do everything within my power to make sure that we don't turn a dime back to the Commonwealth and that everything is eligible expenses.
Yeah, and that's why I said I'm not, that's really not high on my concern list right now. You know, as a committee, we spend most of our time saying no. So, you know, anyway, okay, anything else?
I won't spend it twice, but I will spend it where it's appropriate.
Right. So anybody have any comments, any further comments about the spreadsheet or COVID expenses? I think we covered that topic. Okay, let's move on. The final two items, I just want to give a quick update on the budget. The state has passed an interim budget to take the state funding through October. They have also provided guidance to us and every other municipality that they, let's see, I'll use the right word, anticipate funding local aid at the same level as FY20. Okay. Now, that's what their official communication was. I will give you my opinion and also a little bit more background. I did contact Senator Spilka's office after receiving that, asking for the detailed math, because I was honest with them in the email. I said, I don't see how this math adds up with local aid being 20% or so of the state budget, and a $6 billion shortfall and a $3.8 billion rainy day fund. In order to fund local aid at level amounts to FY20, something else has to go big time, right? You have to make up 2.2, even if you used every dime of the rainy day fund, right? You're talking about trying to make up a couple of $1 billion in revenue. So I asked them, and I've talked to them many times before, so they kind of, know me. And I said to them, point blank, I won't believe it till I see a budget, because I don't know how you can do this. And subsequent to that, there was an NPR story. I think I sent forwarded to the whole committee, basically talking about, with quotes from actual, lawmakers from the Hill, saying that at this time a budget is not feasible. Okay, so I wanted to wait till open session to bring this up, just to mention this to everybody, because it really is a point for discussion publicly. I don't want anybody celebrating that email that we got. At least my personal opinion would be nobody should be celebrating that email that we got saying flat local aid, because there are only two ways to do that. One is to lie, and I'm not saying they're lying, but I'm saying they may believe that. I should say three ways. They can lie about it and then effectively hurt us later by coming along with 9C cuts later in the year. In other words, if they were to come up with some rosy economic projections to justify a local aid being level, and then you go in 5 months into the fiscal year, 6 months in, and suddenly they're not coming to pass, then we're going to see bigger cuts to balance out the second half of the year. Or they're going to do it by anticipating federal funds, which, I think is personally what they're doing, right? Nobody, just to be clear, nobody has told me this from the state. But if I had to guess, I would say that their expectation is that the next coronavirus aid package will have in it some form of municipal aid, state, local aid, that will allow them to replace the local aid and keep it level, okay? However, as we all know, right, there is no aid package currently, passed. They're at an impasse. They're still working on it. We don't know what it's going to have. So in the end, they may be right. There may be a federal package that comes through and allows them to level fund local aid, but it is still way too early to be, saying, Yahoo, we've suddenly, we budgeted for a big cut and it didn't come, so that frees up a little cash. We're very far from that point. So I just wanted to, make sure everybody I don't know how you guys feel. Feel free to offer your opinions, but I have said to people that have asked me about that, I said, I'm not changing the budget plan at all until I see how the math works, because the math right now doesn't add up. So, Mr. Murphy.
Did they give you any feedback on your email, or were they kind of?
No,
Say
in
thank you
fact,
for your
in
meal.
fact, I thought, to be honest with you, I thought it was a little bit telling that I got no direct feedback on my, hey, this math doesn't work comment. Instead, what I got was, we passed an interim budget through the end of October. So, and again, I'm not throwing them under the bus. I think that the real answer to that is that that's what they would like to do. And I applaud them for that, right? They recognize that cutting local aid is a big deal, right? But at the same time, I'm not personally convinced that all the tools are there to make that happen. And as I said, if the Senate, if the federal government gets together, in the next week and passes some great aid package, and then I'd say, okay, yeah, the federal government is going to step in and fill that gap. And now it is possible we could get local aid. And I think, I think that the lack of any data on that is just that they're waiting to see what happens at the federal level before they take any draconian steps. So, Michelle, Ms. Emer, go ahead.
Do they give you any idea of what the chargebacks are going to be?
Well, they didn't, but the one thing I'll tell you about some of the chargebacks that I learned actually in doing this research on just that topic is that some of them have limits on how much they can raise them. So there are some that they can raise arbitrarily, right? But a lot of them have statutory limits on how much the delta can be from one year to the next. So they could raise the offsets a lot. They could raise the offsets and charges, right? But they could not possibly raise them enough to claw back 20% of the local aid. So that they do have that, and you and I both know, having experience in this, they've done that several times where they've raised the top line number and then taken it away on, further down the spreadsheet, so to speak. But I don't think the amount of dollars we're talking about here, I don't think they have the capacity to claw it all back that way this time.
Yeah.
Any other comments? I mean, how do people feel? Do you think that I'm crazy, or should everybody, should we be having a party because of that? Or do people generally agree? I mean, I think it's important that, I felt it was important because I don't want anybody in the public to get this mistaken impression that, everything is just sailing along simply because they sent us an email that said, local aid, we're trying to hold local aid flat, So.
Well, it's the same with what we did, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we tried to, we're using what we can so to not have big dramatic impacts. But I mean, the economy isn't doing well. It's not like it's not going to come and hit home at some point. So. Right.
But the difference is, I think that what we did with our budget was we built in a realistic scenario. Right? It would be different if we had built the budget and said we're going to assume 3% local aid growth and all this stuff, and then said, okay, we figured out, we looked at things and said, what does it take to achieve the financial objectives we need to achieve in the short term? Not firing everybody, keeping everything staffed, and we worked under realistic assumptions to get there. I mean, my concern here is as I said, the feds may come through, and this may all be a moot discussion in a week, right? But at the moment, if they had sent that email and said, our intent is to keep local aid flat, it's contingent upon the feds coming through with additional aid, I think that would have been a better message than just sending something saying, we're anticipating flat local aid next year. Because then at least you're giving the caution that, hey, if what we're counting on doesn't happen, things may change, right? We all know that, but they didn't really state that. They were trying to be more definitive. And that's where I think the problem lies, right? It makes it sound like we've solved this problem. And then the same time they're sending out that email, they're publishing something saying we don't have a budget that's feasible. So,
I've definitely received feedback from both varieties where some people have said they think we were too dramatic, too draconian. And I've also received feedback where people were really content, happy to see how cautious we are in moving forward with this budget and this budget cycle. I know I am very uncomfortable with the idea of gambling on Congress's ability to pass a relief bill for us. But what is within our control is to be fiscally conservative with our budget. And I do agree that this is the right path forward for the time being. As you know, I can hope we are wrong. I can hope the local aid is level, but hope doesn't get us there, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying, Ken. Just to be very public about it, so there's not the accusation that we're all being quiet about this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
as I said, look, I think all
echo
Sunnoaks would love it if local aid did come in flat. I just don't think we can believe it yet.
Well, I don't know how it can be unless the Fed steps up, right? I just
Yep.
can't imagine, given the economy and given what we've seen in terms of GDP decline. And I mean, we're at the worst point I think we've ever been in history. So I'm not saying at the state level, I'm saying, more overall, but I just don't know how there isn't an impact.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, I would agree totally with Tim. Same thing. I've heard the same thing, the same arguments. We were too draconian, we're too conservative. But I think in the end, we're going to be correct. Because, yeah, either they're going to have win both sides of the House and Senate and the presidency, and then they can pass whatever they want. But other than that, I think it's a stalemate. I don't see them coming out and funding additional monies. So.
Yeah. I do think that, as I said, all of us would love to be wrong. And I'd be more than happy to be wrong and we had more available funds than we think. But I think that, we've proven over the last decade plus that we're right more often than we're wrong. And that's a good thing. So, okay. Anybody have any other comments? We'll move on. Okay. Last topic is just town meeting planning, right? So we talked about the budget subcommittee, the capital subcommittee earlier, so we don't need to talk about that. But from a meeting perspective, there are two things that I wanted to just bring up very quickly. First of all, we do have to start planning for fall, although at this point, there's really not a whole heck for a lot for us to do, right? We have to start gathering the capital requests. Ben talked about the capital request policy. We have to move forward with that. So that's why I said I wasn't sure about whether we even needed to meet next week, because we need to have that capital subcommittee meeting. But as a finance committee, there's really nothing. We've passed a budget. The fiscal year is relatively new, so we're not in. There aren't any tremendous financial. I checked with Travis before the meeting to confirm that we don't have any financial pitfalls that have already arisen. So if people are okay with it, what I'll say is we'll meet with the capital subcommittee. We'll meet next Wednesday to discuss the capital planning with Travis and with Ben. But we'll probably postpone our next meeting till the first week of September. I think it's September 1st or something like that. Is it? Yeah, September 1st. So if people are okay with that, then I'll just post us for September 1st, and we'll go from there and we'll start town meeting prep. I did want to add one comment that kind of combines our last topic with this topic. I did have a discussion, and I've mentioned this independently to a couple of the select board members. I said from a financial standpoint, we have to be keeping an eye on what's happening at the federal level, because as you know, one of the financial functions we perform at the October town meeting is kind of the reconciliation of the books once there's a budget, right? We pass it in May, then the state passes their budget, and then we reconcile, free cash and other amounts in October. So I did point out to them that if the state budget isn't going to be done till November this year, right, that aspect of our October town meeting can't happen, right? We could do free cash reconciliation, provided we get it certified, and that's another matter, is whether the certifications will be delayed because of the pandemic or whatever. But in terms of kind of truing up the books, so to speak, with our model versus what actually came through from the state, and that, as I said, ties directly into what we were just talking about, local aid, right? If the feds don't take action for another month, and what they pass is not sufficient, and then the state takes another 2 months to reconcile, right? We could be looking at getting a state budget, in mid-October or November. And if that's the case, then we are, from the financial standpoint, the town meeting becomes less useful. So I mentioned to them, it's something you might want to keep an eye on, because as soon as we know when the state budget might be coming. If it's near the town meeting time, we might want to look to move town meeting to accommodate, right? If the state budget's going to be passed in the first week of November, it would be smarter to meet for town meeting the week after or something like that than it would be to meet on the 27th and then have them say 2 weeks later, okay, here are the numbers. Obviously, that's up to them. Go ahead, Travis.
I would just say too, that's a good point. And there's other components too, right? We pulled it off in Placentino. If Placentino is being used as temporary classrooms, we have an issue with that. A lot of the venues that are school related have complications with that. So I mean, there's other components, but I think that's a good point as well. It's just I always in town of Danvers and Weston, I always would have to wait to have my free cash certified for all the communities that had October town meetings. And I was going to say, I'm finally going to get my free cash certified first. And now we may have to push it, but So those discussions, I think they're going. I think we just keep an open line of communications. I think if we're going to try to do the fourth Monday of October, the question too is going to be venue and how that would all work.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm not advocating for a delay. I just pointed out to them that, hey, this is something to be mindful of, that there's one of our functions of the October town meeting will go away if we don't have a state budget by then. So, okay. So if anybody have anything else you want to bring up before we wrap for this evening? Okay, then, so is everybody okay with the meeting on September 1st rather than next week? Okay, I see a bunch of nodding yes. Okay, that's good. Then we'll do that. So if nobody has any other comments they want to make before we close, I'll entertain the motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, that is not subject to debate. So we'll proceed immediately to a vote. Ms. Nersessian.
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
we're in the midst of.
It's a state primary that day.
Oh, on September 1st?
Yeah.
We know who's going to win. What's the point? No, just kidding. Okay, well, would everybody be okay with an 8 o'clock start on September 1st?
No, can we do some other time? Can we do it the next day?
Different day.
Okay, then since we can't interrupt this vote and we can't have further discussion on it, what I will say is we can have calendar scheduling discussions through email. That's legal. So send me your preferences for dates and we'll put something up. I'll find a date.
Well, could we instead meet next week instead and then skip the first?
That's possible. I just don't know whether we'd have anything to meet about. That's what I'm saying. That's my point. I don't know if we'll have any.
Well, the liaisons.
Yeah. Okay. So Mr. Murphy.
Yes, let's adjourn.
Yes. Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, August 18th meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you just heard, we don't quite know yet whether we'll be meeting next Tuesday or the following week, but we'll work that out and we'll post as appropriate. So stay tuned to the town's website to find out when our next meeting is. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.